The siren cut through the afternoon like a blade, blue lights bouncing off rain-slick asphalt. A small crowd pressed against the metal barricades outside the subway entrance, phones raised, whispers buzzing. The smell of wet concrete and cheap coffee hung in the air. In the center of it all, a uniformed officer laughed, short, sharp, careless, as a little black boy stood trembling, his backpack soaked, knees scraped raw. "Please, he didn't do anything," the child said, his voice cracking like thin glass. "My dad said tell the truth, even when you're scared." A ripple of snickers moved through the crowd. Someone muttered about rules. Someone else said, "That's just how it is." The officer leaned closer, the badge catching the light, his shadow swallowing the boy's face. Cameras zoomed in. A city watched without blinking. From the edge of the crowd, a single father stepped forward. His jacket was worn, his hands rough, his eyes dark with something older than anger. He heard his own heartbeat thudding louder than the siren. He saw the boy's hands shaking. He remembered a promise. "Sir," the father said quietly, voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "He's a child." The officer laughed again. The crowd leaned in. Somewhere a phone caught the moment. Somewhere a line was crossed that could never be uncrossed. This was the beginning of a story people would later wish they hadn't scrolled past, because missing this moment would change everything. The apartment woke before the sun. Thin gray light slipped through the broken blinds, cutting the room into quiet stripes. Outside, the city breathed heavily, buses groaning, a distant siren crying and then fading, footsteps slapping against damp pavement. Inside, Daniel moved with care, like a man trained not to disturb the air around him. The kettle clicked off, steam rose, fogging the small kitchen window. The smell of cheap coffee filled the room, sharp and grounding. Daniel took a sip, winced, then forced a small smile. Some mornings didn't need to be good. They just needed to pass. From the bedroom came a soft cough. Daniel's hand froze mid-motion. He set the mug down and crossed the room quietly. Malik lay curled under a thin blanket, curls sticking to his forehead, chest rising unevenly. The nightlight cast a warm amber glow, turning shadows gentle. Daniel brushed his fingers across Malik's hair. "You okay, champ?" he whispered. Malik's eyes opened halfway. "You're still here." "Always," Daniel said without hesitation. Malik studied his face, serious, even half asleep. "People stare at us again today?" Daniel felt the question before he heard it. "Maybe," he said carefully, "but that's not because of you." Malik nodded, unconvinced but trusting. "Can I hold your hand longer this time?" Daniel smiled. "As long as you want." In the bathroom mirror, Daniel barely recognized himself. Tired eyes, a faint scar near his temple that never fully faded. He buttoned his shirt slowly, smoothing the fabric twice, then opened the drawer. The pen rested there. Old, heavy, metal worn smooth where his thumb always pressed. He hesitated before picking it up. That pen had once signed a statement powerful people tried to erase. It had protected strangers who never knew his face, and it had ended the life Daniel used to have. Years ago, he had worked quietly inside the system, chasing truth without asking permission. When he uncovered corruption tied to security contracts and selective enforcement, the warnings came fast, then the offers, then the threats. Daniel chose silence for others, not himself. He testified anonymously, leaked what mattered, walked away before retaliation could reach the people he'd protected, a young public defender and her son. When the dust settled, Daniel vanished. New job, new name, no recognition, no safety net. Silence kept them alive, but silence also followed him. At the bus stop, Daniel stood behind Malik, his hand resting lightly on the boy's backpack strap. People filled the space around them, pressed suits and tired eyes. Conversations dipped when Daniel stepped closer. A security guard watched too long. Malik noticed. "Why do they look like that?" he whispered. Daniel crouched to his level. The streetlight above flickered, buzzing faintly. "Sometimes people decide who you are before you speak." Malik frowned. "That's not fair." "No," Daniel said softly. "It isn't." On the bus, Malik pressed his forehead to the cold window, tracing shapes in the fogged glass. Daniel stood over him, steadying them both as the bus lurched forward. "If I'm quiet today," Malik said suddenly, "will it be better?" Daniel's chest tightened. "You don't need to shrink to be safe," he said. "You belong exactly as you are." Malik nodded, absorbing the words slowly. At the school gate, Malik waved once before disappearing inside. Daniel watched until the doors closed, the bell ringing sharp and final. He stayed a second longer than necessary, the sound echoing like a warning he couldn't quite explain. Walking to work, Daniel passed cafes with polished glass and private security. Laughter spilled freely inside. Outside, his reflection slipped past unnoticed, invisible yet always watched. At the warehouse, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, boxes stacked, orders shouted. Daniel worked without complaint. Stability mattered more than pride. During break, he sat alone on a crate and rolled the pen between his fingers. Click, silence, click again. The pen wasn't just a memory. It was a line he had crossed once and promised himself he never would again. His phone buzzed. Early dismissal today. Daniel exhaled slowly. Early meant crowds, cameras, less control. Outside, clouds thickened, dark and heavy. Somewhere nearby, sirens rose again, closer this time. Daniel slipped the pen into his pocket and stood. He didn't know it yet, but the day had already decided for him. The silence he'd built his life around was about to be tested, and this time it wouldn't be enough. The rain began as a whisper, then grew impatient. It drummed against the subway stairs, slicked the metal railings, turned the streetlights into smeared halos of white and blue. Evening commuters crowded the entrance, coats darkening, shoes squeaking against wet concrete. The city sounded irritated, horns blaring, brakes hissing, a distant train roaring underground like a held breath finally released. Daniel held Malik's hand tightly as they climbed the steps. Malik skipped one puddle, then another, laughing despite the cold droplets soaking his cuffs. The smell of rain mixed with diesel and hot pretzels from a nearby cart. For a brief second, it felt ordinary, almost peaceful. Then a shout cut through the noise. "Hey, stop right there." Daniel turned. Two uniformed transit officers stood near the turnstiles, one tall and broad with a polished baton, the other younger, smirking as he adjusted his cap. Between them was a teenage boy with dark skin and a torn hoodie, hands raised, eyes darting. Phones were already out. The crowd slowed, curiosity blooming like a bruise. Malik's fingers tightened. "Daddy, why are they yelling? Keep close," Daniel said, voice low. His chest tightened as a familiar tension crawled up his spine. He'd seen this before. Everyone had. The tall officer scanned faces, then locked eyes on Malik. "You," he said, pointing. "What's in the bag?" Malik froze. Rain slid down his eyelashes. It's my school bag," he whispered. The younger officer chuckled. "Mind if we check? Rules are rules." Daniel felt heat rush to his face. He heard the crowd murmur approval, indifference, judgment. He smelled the sharp tang of wet nylon and authority. He stepped forward instinctively. "He's 7, Daniel said, calm but firm. "We're just going home." The tall officer smiled without warmth. "Then you won't mind if we take a look." Malik's lower lip trembled. "Daddy, I didn't take anything," he said, tears slipping free, mixing with rain. "I promise." "I tell the truth, you told me to." The words hit Daniel like a punch. A memory flashed, another rainy night, another crowd, another choice. His heart thudded hard, loud in his ears. "Please," Malik said again, voice breaking. "I didn't do anything wrong." The younger officer laughed, a careless sound that echoed off the tiled walls. Kids lie, especially when their parents teach them. Something snapped, not loudly, but cleanly. Daniel felt it like a line drawn in wet cement. He took a breath, slow and steady, and stepped between Malik and the officers. "Sir," Daniel said, meeting the tall officer's eyes, "if you have cause, explain it. Otherwise, let us pass." The crowd leaned in, phones rose higher. The rain seemed to fall harder, drumming faster, as if urging the moment forward. The tall officer's jaw tightened. "You don't get to lecture us," he said. "You people always think," he stopped himself, but it was too late. The words hung there, heavy and unmistakable. A ripple moved through the crowd. Some nodded, some looked away. No one intervened. Malik sobbed quietly now, shoulders shaking. "Daddy, I'm scared," he whispered. "Why do they hate me?" Daniel swallowed, pain blooming behind his eyes. "They don't know you," he said softly. "Look at me." Malik did. Daniel knelt despite the rain soaking through his jeans, bringing his face level with his son's. The subway lights flickered, casting sharp shadows. A camera zoomed in, catching the tear sliding down Daniel's cheek as he wiped Malik's face with his sleeve. "Listen to me," Daniel said, voice steady though his hands shook. "You are good, you are brave, and you did nothing wrong." The tall officer scoffed. "Enough, bag now." Daniel stood. He felt every eye on him, the weight of a system daring him to comply. He heard the distant train again, felt the pen's absence like a phantom weight in his pocket. He chose. "No," Daniel said. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The younger officer's smile vanished. "You refusing a lawful order." "I'm refusing harassment," Daniel replied, "and I'm documenting it." He raised his phone. The screen glowed, rain-speckled, unmistakable. The crowd shifted, unease spreading. Someone whispered, "This is going to blow up." The tall officer stepped forward, anger flaring. "Turn that off." "Daddy," Malik said, small but clear, "don't let them take my bag. It has my drawing, it's for you." Daniel's chest tightened. He held the phone steady. "You're being recorded," he said evenly. "Explain your cause." Silence stretched. Rain pattered. The officer's eyes flicked to the cameras surrounding them, dozens now. He hesitated. Then the younger officer lunged, grabbing Malik's backpack. Malik cried out, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through everything. Daniel moved without thinking. He caught the officer's wrist, firm but controlled, stopping the pull. "Don't touch my child," Daniel said, voice low, dangerous. For a split second, time fractured. The crowd erupted, shouts, gasps, phones shaking. A woman screamed. Someone laughed nervously. The tall officer reached for his radio. And above it all, Malik's voice rang out, trembling but loud enough for every microphone. "He didn't hurt anyone," Malik cried. "Please stop. My dad is a good man." The words hit like a bell. The younger officer yanked free, stumbling back. The tall officer barked orders into the radio. Sirens wailed closer now, converging. A passerby shouted, "I got it all on video." Another said, "This is messed up." A hashtag was born before the rain could wash it away. Daniel wrapped an arm around Malik, shielding him as more officers arrived. Lights flashing, red and blue painting the crowd in harsh stripes. The city watched, breath held, as a single father stood his ground, not knowing that this moment, caught from a dozen angles, would tear his quiet life wide open. The video didn't explode all at once, it seeped. Daniel first saw it during his lunch break, sitting alone on a plastic chair behind the warehouse. His phone buzzed once, then again, then wouldn't stop. Notifications stacked faster than he could clear them. Comments, shares, messages from numbers he didn't recognize. He tapped the screen. Rain, sirens, Malik's small shaking shoulders. The officer's laugh, sharp, careless, unmistakable. Daniel's throat closed. Someone had slowed it down, zoomed in, put captions over Malik's face. "Look how scared he is. This is America. Why is the cop smiling?" Daniel shut the phone off and stared at the concrete between his boots. Oil stains, old cracks. The world felt tilted, like it had shifted without asking his permission. When he stood up, his legs didn't feel like they belonged to him. By the time he reached home, the video had crossed borders he couldn't see. News vans lined the block. A woman with a microphone turned the moment she saw him. "Sir, are you the father in the video?" Daniel kept walking. Inside the apartment, the air felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. Malik sat on the couch with his backpack still on, knees pulled to his chest. His eyes lifted slowly. "Daddy," his voice was careful. "Are we in trouble?" Daniel crossed the room in 2 steps and knelt in front of him. "No," he said faster than he meant to. "No, you're not." Malik searched his face. "Everyone at school knows my name now." Daniel swallowed. "What did they say?" "Some kids said I was brave." Malik paused. "Some said I made it worse." The words landed harder than any shove. Malik looked down at his hands. "Did I do something bad?" Daniel pulled him close, holding him tighter than usual, as if the world might try to take him anyway. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said into Malik's hair. "Not one thing." A knock at the door cut through the room, then another, louder. Daniel stiffened. He moved Malik behind him before opening the door a crack. The building manager stood there, eyes nervous, hands clasped. "I just wanted to check in," he said. "People are asking questions, reporters, police." Daniel nodded once. "And the owner thinks it might be better if you lay low for a while." "How long?" Daniel asked. The man hesitated. "Indefinitely." The door closed gently, but the message stayed. That night, the internet turned mean. Death threats mixed with praise. Strangers argued over Malik's fear like it was a debate topic. Daniel scrolled until his chest hurt, then threw the phone onto the bed. Outside, someone shouted his name. A bottle shattered somewhere down the street. Malik flinched. "Is that for us?" Daniel forced his voice steady. "No, just noise." But when something heavy hit the apartment door, thud, sharp and deliberate, Daniel felt the old instincts wake up. The ones he'd buried. He turned off the lights, pulled Malik close, waited. Minutes passed, then silence. Later, after Malik finally slept, Daniel sat at the kitchen table in the dark. The pen lay in front of him, cold against the wood. His phone buzzed again. "Work tomorrow canceled. Don't come back. No explanation. No goodbye." Daniel closed his eyes. He had tried to live quietly, tried to stay small, tried to protect his son by disappearing. Outside, sirens wailed again, closer than before. Daniel picked up the pen and rolled it between his fingers. For the first time in years, he didn't put it away. The world had found them anyway. And silence was no longer keeping anyone safe. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, quiet and unexpected. Daniel was folding laundry when his phone rang, an unfamiliar number. He watched it buzz for a moment, the vibration rattling softly against the table, then answered. "Mr. Carter?" a woman asked. Her voice was calm, precise, professional. "Yes, my name is Alina Brooks. I'm a journalist with the North City Ledger. I'd like to talk to you about what happened and about who you were before." The room seemed to tilt. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. The washing machine hummed behind him, steady and indifferent. "I don't give interviews." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm calling." They met 2 days later in a small public library, the kind with worn carpet and tall windows that let in too much light. Dust floated in the air like tiny stars. Malik sat at a table nearby, coloring quietly, glancing up every few seconds to make sure his father was still there. Alina didn't pull out a camera, just a notebook, a pen. "I didn't find you through the video," she said. "I found you through a case file that was never supposed to exist." Daniel's jaw tightened. She slid a photocopy across the table. Redacted lines, old dates, familiar language. His chest tightened as he recognized his own handwriting in the margins. "You disappeared after this," Alina said softly. "You exposed a corruption ring tied to private security contracts. You protected a public defender and her son. And you vanished." Malik looked up. "Dad," he asked, "is this about you?" Daniel met his eyes. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. "Yes," he said, "it is." Alina leaned back. "The officer in the video wasn't acting alone," she continued. "The behavior is systemic. Policies, training, silence. Your past explains why you reacted the way you did." Daniel's voice was low. "My past explains why I kept my mouth shut." Alina studied him. "And your son explains why you can't anymore." That night the story broke, not with outrage, with evidence. Documents appeared online. Patterns emerged. Internal memos, budget reallocations, training videos that told officers who to watch more closely, whose behavior to interpret as threat. Daniel's name appeared last, not as a hero, as a witness. The tone shifted. Morning news shows stopped shouting. They listened. Analysts spoke carefully. The video was replayed with context. Malik's face blurred now, his name protected. At school, a teacher knelt beside Malik's desk. "Your dad is very brave," she said quietly. Malik frowned. "He's just my dad." Daniel watched from the hallway, heart swelling painfully. A week later, they were invited downtown. A glass building rose into the sky, reflecting clouds and sunlight. Inside, the air was cool and clean, footsteps echoing on polished floors. A senior executive from the city's oversight board greeted Daniel with a stiff handshake. "Your testimony years ago saved lives," the man said. "We didn't know who you were then, we do now." Malik squeezed Daniel's hand. "You told the truth before," he whispered, "even when it was scary." Daniel swallowed. "I did," in a quiet conference room, cameras absent. Daniel spoke again, not loudly, not angrily. He spoke about systems, about training, about silence. He spoke about what happens when fear becomes policy. When he finished, the room was silent. Later, as they stepped back onto the street, sunlight warm on their faces, Malik looked up at him. "Dad," he said, voice clear and certain, "they know you didn't do anything wrong now." Daniel knelt, meeting his eyes. Traffic murmured around them. "I never did," he said gently, "but sometimes the world needs proof." Malik smiled, pride shining through lingering uncertainty. "I'm glad you didn't stay quiet." Daniel looked at the reflection of them in the glass, two figures standing close, unafraid. For the first time in years, the truth felt heavier than fear. And this time, he didn't set it down. The apartment was quiet but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that stayed alert, like the world hadn't forgiven them yet, only paused. Daniel sat at the small table, papers spread out in front of him. Official letters, legal language, no apologies, no relief. Outside the window, traffic moved normally. People laughed. Someone argued on a phone. Life had already gone back to normal, just not theirs. Malik sat on the floor with his crayons. He was drawing, erasing, drawing again. Every time footsteps passed in the hallway, his shoulders stiffened. Daniel noticed. He didn't rush to reassure him. He stood, walked over, and sat down on the floor beside him. "We're not running anymore," Daniel said quietly. Not bravely, not loudly, just steady. Malik didn't look up. "Are they done with us?" Daniel hesitated just a second. "Some of them are," he said. "Some aren't, but now they have to be careful." Malik finally looked at him. "Because of the video," Daniel shook his head slightly. "Because people are watching." The phone on the table buzzed again. Daniel glanced at it. Another message, another update, another reminder that this wasn't over. He turned the phone face down. Today wasn't about winning. It was about surviving without shrinking. Malik pushed his drawing forward. It showed a man and a boy holding hands. There were no officers, no crowd, no phones, just a road stretching forward unfinished. Daniel swallowed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old pen, the one he'd carried for years. Before, it had felt like weight, like failure he couldn't put down. Now it felt different, not lighter, just steadier. Daniel placed the pen on the table, not as a weapon, not as a shield, but as a tool. "We keep going," he said. "Not because they were wrong, but because you matter." Malik nodded once, not smiling, not afraid, just listening. And that was enough for now. Morning arrived gently. Sunlight slid through the window in slow, quiet lines, warming the floor before anyone spoke a word. The city outside still made its noise, buses sighing, doors slamming, voices rising and falling. But inside the apartment, there was calm. The kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind you only notice when it's new. Daniel stood at the sink, rinsing a mug, listening to Malik hum to himself from the bedroom. The sound was off-key, confident, unafraid. It made Daniel smile without thinking. "Dad," Malik called, footsteps padding closer. "Did you hear? I remembered my whole poem today." "That's my guy," Daniel said, turning. The light caught Malik's face fully now. No shadows, no flinch when he was seen. They walked to school together, the air cool and clean after rain. The sidewalk still bore faint dark patches, reminders of storms that had passed. Daniel noticed them, but they didn't slow his step. At the school gate, Malik stopped and looked up. "You're coming later, right?" Daniel nodded. "I wouldn't miss it." Malik hesitated, then said quietly, "I'm not scared anymore." Daniel crouched so they were eye level. The world felt still for a moment, like it was listening. "That doesn't mean the world changed overnight," he said gently. "It means you did." Malik smiled, proud and soft all at once. "You helped me." Daniel shook his head. "You helped me too." As Malik ran inside, Daniel stood watching, hands in his pockets. His fingers brushed against the pen. He didn't pull it out. He didn't need to. Later that afternoon, Daniel sat on a bench across the street, notebook balanced on his knee. He wasn't writing testimony. He wasn't documenting harm. He was sketching ideas for a workshop, questions, not answers. The breeze flipped a page on its own. Around him, people passed. Some glanced at him. Some didn't. The world hadn't transformed into something perfect, but it had shifted, and so had he. When Malik burst out of the school doors, waving a paper above his head, Daniel stood, heart light. "Dad," Malik shouted, breathless. "I read it loud. I didn't mess up." Daniel laughed, the sound free and unguarded. "I knew you wouldn't." They walked home together, shadows stretching long behind them. The sun dipped lower, golden now, forgiving. That night, as Daniel turned off the lights, he paused by the shelf. The pen rested there, exactly where he'd left it. He touched it once briefly, then let his hand fall. Some moments don't end when the cameras stop. Some courage doesn't look like shouting. And the ones who change the world most are often the ones who return home quietly, make dinner, walk their child to school, and choose again and again not to stay silent when it matters. Somewhere out there, another line was waiting to be crossed. And when it was, Daniel knew this. He wouldn't miss the moment.